Hey friends, good evening. Paul here. I'm doing a wood carving project, finally, with my Mora 120. It's been a while. I've really been looking forward to working with this, my favorite knife. Working on a piece of white birch here, paper birch. Sawed this down the other day with my Corona razor tooth saw. Check it out. Here's a nice piece of paper, white birch, that's fallen down. And I carry my Corona razor tooth saw, this section right in there. It'll be really nice for some carving. So after bringing it home and stripping off the bark, I decided what I wanted to go about here, just generally marked it up with a number 2 pencil and kind of figuring out a lot as I'm going along here. Yeah, the paper birch, the white birch, is very nice to work up. It's a little damp. Not much. You can see it's drying out pretty well, but it's a little damp. It's about 900 on the Jonka hardness scale, so slightly softer than black cherry, which is another wonderful woodworking wood. Of course, folks, a lot harder than linden wood or basswood, or certainly resinous pine wood. But it's a good compromise wood, and it's pretty plentiful where I live. The thing was with white birch, you can see some spalting taking place there, which is a fungus. And that's actually, those black lines you see there is also spalting, which some wood carvers use, woodworkers use for aesthetic beauty if you get it just right before it starts rotting and compromising the integrity of the wood. But you do want to take out the punkiness of the spalt, which I've pretty much done. And white birch, paper birch, does spalt very easily, which means it rots quickly. What I love about these Mora woodworking knives, the 120 and the 106, it's a longer knife. It was actually my first Mora woodworking knife, the 106. I tend to prefer the 120. I like the shorter blade. But I'll use the 106 here as well this evening, just to give you guys a comparison. Or several different techniques I use as a beginning woodworker, wood carver. One is, I don't know the technical terms for this stuff, but I just call it, I press into the wood with the top portion of the blade there. And I do go over in an outline. One thing with these knives that I'm very careful of, because I've cut myself pretty badly outdoors, doing bushcraft projects, etc., is always working away from the blade. And any force I put on it is either directly downward, but with my hand always in back of wherever that blade is working, with some very minor exceptions of just very kind of, low pressure stuff. But what I'm doing is I'm just marking this off right now again. And I find that, like with something like this ear that I'm really going to need to get into to create that 3-dimensionality, it's good to go over it a few times, because the more that I press into it here, the more that I'm going to get when I carve away into it, which you'll see. I'll do that next. So after doing some good pressing, cutting around that shape of the ear, what I do then, and what I love these knives for, is they have such strong tips. I have not broken the tip on my 120 yet. I'm sure it'll happen someday. Whereas I did break it a little bit there on the 106. Nothing too big, but I've heard amongst wood carvers that that's pretty normal, is to, sometimes accidentally break your tip. So I go in there with the tip, and I gouge away, or I slice and gouge around where I just pressed into. and then I take away all that wood, and then I chop it where it meets. Okay, for the sake of brevity tonight, I'll demonstrate the 106 here by comparison. I just took off a good amount there on the 120. You can see where that's going. I'm just trying to get around that earlobe there, and you can just see already, even for something like that, it's too big. Whereas the 120 is so nimble. It's nimble yet powerful, but you know, I'll work with this anyway just to give you guys a demo. I just sharpened this actually, so it's actually sharper than the 120. It's a great knife. I mean, if you're working larger scale than I am, but I tend to work small scale, you know, with my artwork or with other stuff. I kind of like to get stuff finished, so I like smaller scale. But if you're a larger scale worker, by all means pick up a 106 because you're gonna love it. Kind of bummed that I lost that tip right there on this thing. It's probably, I don't know, maybe a millimeter, but you know, what's funny is I can actually tell the difference. Are any of you wood carvers out there ambidextrous? Because earlier I was working on something around the face or the eyes or something like that, and I actually used my left hand for something very small. It was really the best way to get at it, and I thought to myself, I wonder how many really good woodworkers, wood carvers get to be ambidextrous. Because for sure it would be a convenient thing to have, but you got to really be careful as far as safety goes. So the 106 is feeling good. Let's do some slicing technique with the 106. I haven't talked about that yet. Slicing. That's another technique. See how I'm slicing layers there? I'm sure there's words for all of this stuff that maybe some of you guys could tell me in the comments, like pressing. I call it pressing. Slicing is another one. I also actually can use this as a almost like a drill. Like I can go in there like the eye socket, or like those nostrils, for example. I was going in there earlier and kind of drilling out and then picking its nose out. I was actually using the back of the knife too. The spine is kind of like a gouge to scrape stuff out, or a scraper. So, you know, there's many different techniques you can use with the one tool, which I like. I like the versatility of this tool because I've seen woodworkers use chisels, for example, and mallets and stuff, and you know, for sure for larger scale stuff. But for me, I'm interested in whittling like this. I'm interested in doing small scale projects. So any chance to, you know, sharpen my knives and go out in the fresh air and nature and get some good wood, you know, it's a fun exercise as well, because you don't know what you're going to get, and storms are coming through all the time, and limbs are coming down off trees, or perhaps your town maintenance crew is taking down a tree in your neighborhood, and before they put all that wood in the chipper, you know, you can just go ask them, you know, could I have a piece of that? Could I take that wood? And they'll let you. I have a friend in Vermont who will drive hundreds of miles to go pick up a black walnut tree that, you know, has come down in a storm, for example. Post and beam worker, you know, he makes dovetail joints and does joinery and timber frame and all that stuff. I mean, you know, wood is a real passion. All right, so I've been working with the 106 here for a while, and I'm curious to kind of move right over to the 120 so I can give you guys a real direct comparison. Well, right away, I have to say I notice the length of the blade is different, but that really does go back to the scale that I work is quite small, especially doing this ear. I was actually saving doing this ear for this video tonight because I thought it'd be cool to show you guys, you know, how I'm going about this carving. I will say though, the 106 is a great knife. You know what? Just get both. Just be done with it and get both of these knives, because you're going to use them. If you're working small scale like I am, you're going to love your 120. And if you start working larger scale or want to slice off larger sections of wood, say on, you know, projects that are like this big, you're going to want the 106. So get them both. You can't go wrong if your budget allows for it. I'm also noticing that it's fun to identify geometric shapes in my carving and then carve those out. Like for right here, for example, in the upper portion of the ear, I'm seeing an opportunity of carving out a triangle. So what I do there is, again, I'm doing that pressure thing where I'm just chopping into this. Kind of reminds me when I used to do some woodblock printmaking. I used to do the same thing, just chop into the wood. And I'm making a little triangle shape. And I'm pressing those three sides of the triangle. And then I'm going to gouge out with the tip of my knife. Gouge out, chisel out from the triangle that I created. And I also noticed I was doing that earlier in the face of here. I was creating triangles underneath the eyes earlier and stuff like that. So identifying geometric shapes in the carving is a lot of fun. Hopefully generate some interest, as I'm going to be updating this project and showing you how I make out as I go along. You know, I kind of have a vision for working up the entire piece of wood with some ornate, maybe leaves and roots growing out of the forehead, and maybe some kind of design thing down here, maybe a beard kind of connected to his chin. I'm really not sure yet, but those are ideas. For right now, I'm going to continue working on the ear, and I wish you guys a good evening. Please post your comments below. Any tips are appreciated from you woodworkers, wood carvers in the audience. And thanks so much for watching. I look forward to posting back progress on this carving. So subscribe to my channel if you're new here.